Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Good. I would imagine keep an eye on this Steelers-Ravens situation. What do you tell your team about that and how it impacts you guys?
Well, the biggest thing we told the guys is just, hey, be ready. We're coming back to work on Wednesday, and just be ready for whatever happens. I mean, we're kind of in that situation right now throughout the league, and we're kind of a touch and go. But we'll be ready.
Good morning, Ron. I'm just curious. There's this new stat basically looking at pass rushers like double team rate, win rate, and Chase Young is one of those players as a rookie who's being doubled more than some of the premier pass rushers in the league, and he's a higher win rate. I'm just curious, why do you think it is that he's receiving this level of attention as a rookie versus guys like a Khalil Mack, J.J. Watt, and people like that? I mean, that's a lot of
Well,
attention for somebody like that.
I think a lot of it had to do with the way he started. People, he burst onto the scene. He had some success right away, and people tend to pay attention to stuff like that. If you look at the people we've played and look at the things that they do, a lot of it does play into way we attack guys. And so I think a big part of it is his initial couple of weeks. And then, most recently, I just think the success that we've had as a defense, people look to the premier rusher. The left defensive end position, or excuse me, the right defensive end position. Say, hey, we've got to be able to handle that guy.
Thank you, Ron.
Heidi.
Hi, Ron. I'm sure you saw the Broncos not having any quarterbacks on Sunday for their game. In what ways have you guys had to adapt or alter the way you build or maintain the roster just to account for such emergencies related to COVID?
Well, we try to make sure our guys understand that specific people have to be smart and have to make sure that they are keeping themselves away, from the contact tracing as much as possible. Initially, when we had 4 quarterbacks, it was a little bit easier to do. Now we're down to 3, and we've got to make sure that Steven Montez is aware of it. They've got to maintain the social distancing. We have Vedvik, the kicker that we brought in. He's a kicker punter. Same thing. He's in certain meetings. He's social distancing during social meetings. He's social distancing during practice. He works off to the side on his own sometimes, stuff like that. We try to make sure that on certain times, the backups, the practice squad guys understand that they've got to stay separated. So we're trying to reinforce that even more so now. It's something that we've talked about as a staff this week, is that we got to make sure that these guys all understand they've got to maintain the social distance.
I know a lot of teams or others were talking about the notion of a quarantine quarterback, of having a guy that you kind of stash away and involve only virtually. Has that ever been a consideration for you guys?
We didn't necessarily stash them away and keep them, in touch virtually. We did have them in meetings. We did have them out at practice, but again, we've tried to make sure we've maintained that social distancing, and I think that's really important.
Thanks, Ron.
All right.
Hey, Ron, I'm curious, football is such a regimented, schedule-oriented sport. How do you help these players and yourself to deal with so much unpredictability this year? How difficult is that?
You got to talk about it. And that's really the only thing that we've done, is we've just talked about the situation we're in, and we try to make sure the guys understand how important it is to be adaptable. That's the biggest thing is, and I've told the coaches this, and I've told the players this, we can't make a big deal if something changes. When you start worrying about that, what was interesting becomes important, and that's what we don't want to happen. It's not important. It's interesting. It's different. Okay, we deal with it and we move on. And that's that's the thing. It's like having been in Carolina, having been in certain places that didn't have indoor facilities, and so you have to go out and practice in the elements. And if you make a big deal about practicing in the elements, you're not going to have a good practice. And so that's what we've got to do. We've got to be able to focus and handle the situation.
And then you guys, you just finished a stretch, against the Cincinnati Giants and Dallas and all that. Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Seattle, they're certainly at a different level when you look at their records. How much are you looking forward to seeing how much this team has grown to handle games like this?
Well, I'm very interested, because again, these 3 teams most certainly will be measuring sticks for us. Right now, the AFC, the Pittsburgh's the elite. And then we're going to go up against San Francisco, who was the elite last year, and they're finding their way back. And then Seattle, who's one of the elite right now. So it's going to be a good test. We'll see how we handle it. We see how we handle it as a coaching staff and as players.
Thank you.
All righty.
Hey, Ron, just kind of following up on the COVID stuff. When you see a weekend like the weekend that the NFL just had with the Broncos starting a wide receiver, the Ravens going what they're going through, like, are you concerned at all that the NFL might not even finish the season? Like, does that thought ever cross your mind?
Yeah, it has, to be honest. But, we'll see what happens. It's one of those things that, if something happens and we have to pause for a week, well, then it's a bye week for everybody. And then we pick up where we left off. I think that's most certainly a doable thing if that's what we have to do. But I do think we're committed as a league to trying to play every game and then get into a playoffs and have a regular playoffs and have a Super Bowl. That would be a huge victory for not just us, but for our fans and quite honestly for the nation. That that if you do things the right way, if you follow the protocols, you can get through these things. And I think that's part of what we're hoping to be able to show everybody is that by following the protocols, wearing the mask as much as you can, social distancing like you're supposed to, and then personal hygiene. Maybe it helps. Maybe it gets other people to go, wow, look what they did. And this is a group of people that, we're committed to doing it. And hopefully we can accomplish that.
And I know you guys are focused on the Steelers this week, but, with San Francisco not having a home stadium right now because of their county stuff, how closely are you monitoring that situation where you guys might be playing in 2 weeks?
Well, we are monitoring it, but one guy that it affects right now more so than anything else is our director of football operations, Paul Kelly. And so I'm going to let him do all the worrying, and I'll try to hopefully keep everybody focused on Pittsburgh.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Ron, you had that play in Thanksgiving when Michael Gallup made the catch, was short of the sticks, but they ruled it a first down, and you had to challenge, and there's been a couple other questionable spots throughout the year. Are you surprised that there isn't a better way to track the football and come up with a better way to spot it with all the technology you see elsewhere in the league?
Well, I think there is, and I think we'll develop that. But again, let's remember that for the most part, the referees are running and they see angles and stuff like that. And they're trying to see where the ball is. And so they do the best they can. But, I've heard everything from people saying, well, they're going to put a GPS thing in the football and, they're going to have the sticks that'll have the counterpart to it or whatever. So there are some thoughts and some conversations about the best way to fix it. But right now, we're working with the human element of it. And we've got to understand that the referees are doing the best from the angles that they have. I mean, again, it's frustrating, for me sometimes. But, we just have to understand that's the part of the game that we're living with, and that's the human element. And I'm not sure if you take the human element out of the game anyways.
Hey, Ron, you've talked about the importance of understanding what's interesting versus what's important since the preseason. I wonder if that becomes more of a focus or more of an emphasis with you and your team, as a division race heats up.
Oh yeah, most certainly. Because again, when you look at the division race and you look at what we all have to do, we've got 5 games left, all of us. Philadelphia plays today, but we all have 5 games left, and the key is, how you do each week. And so we got to focus and put a lot of focus in on getting ready for Pittsburgh. I mean, again, they're undefeated. They're the elite of the AFC, and they're playing very good football right now. So we've got to figure out our game plan, and then we've got to learn it, practice it, and get ready and see what happens. In the meantime, each other team has to do the same thing. Everything else is inconsequential as far as I'm concerned outside our division. Because I've been through this, and I know that when you focus on what you have to do, when you focus on, your next opponent, because it's the most important game you'll play, you give yourself a better chance. But when you start worrying about, wow, what if this happens? No, you can't control that. Control what you can. That's what gives you the chance to be successful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Ron, good morning. I hope you and your family got to enjoy some time at Thanksgiving after the game. Can you go back to Thursday with all the trick plays and the actual execution? I assume that you guys as a staff have had that in and have been practicing for a while on that, and you just didn't install it on last week. But how do you go about deploying what you've been working on all year and maybe haven't used? Is that just a gut feel as the game is going on? Is that something where you look and you say, okay, the opponent's been through a tough week and they didn't have time to practice, so maybe they're not prepared? How do you kind of go about that?
It really is about feel and opportunity as far as those things are concerned, Chris. And I think the thing that everybody has to understand is that there's no measuring stick. There's no data or analytics that tells you now's the right time to run a fake or now's the right time to run that trick play, okay? You can look at situations and say, man, if I get that situation, now's the time. You know, one of the things that we do look at in analytics, it does tell you when certain teams have certain tendencies. You know, like a lot of times when a team gets around the 50-yard line and it's 1st and 10, it's a play action, take a shot, okay? But there's nothing that says that when you're backed up and it's 4th and 9 or whatever it is, that now is the best time to run a fake punt. Nothing tells you. In some situations, what does tell you is your gut saying, okay, gosh, we got to get some momentum. We got to do something to get the momentum. And that's probably what Coach was doing. That's probably what Coach Mike was doing. He was probably thinking, if we can get this, man, it'll flip the emotions. It'll flip, it'll flip it. And give us a chance. And that's probably what he was thinking. That's probably why he did what he did. As far as we were concerned, you know, we made a couple of plays. We had some momentum. We had them back on their heels. And now was the time to run the tight end pass, okay? We got the ball down into the red zone. You know, now was the time to run the annexation, you know, the Bummerooski. And so our guys just felt, you know, that's what it is. And just so you know, we only practiced the Bummerooski twice last week.
Hey, Ron, this is Darren Haynes. You were mentioning about all the, the COVID things that you guys have to do, and it's the reality. You have to go by these steps. And, I believe they say you just took your COVID test, and then you have NFL players who are frustrated because, games are being moved around. I'm just wondering, can you remember a point during this season, if you can kind of describe where you kind of had that, man, I'm just so over it kind of moment where it's just so frustrating, but you got to get through it?
It really is, Darren. I mean, as far as we've gone so far, sometimes it does get frustrating. It really does. Like, and I'll be honest, we're in the super protocols right now where we can't go in on Monday and Tuesday, and I'm one person that I'm not fond of the Zoom concept, holding meetings during Zoom with the Zoom, because it's hard to see everybody's reactions, sometimes I say something sarcastic and I want to see your guys' reaction and I can't. And some people might take it the wrong way. So I've tried not to be sarcastic because sarcasm and humor does not translate. So I've tried to be aware of that. And so it's hard and you get frustrated. And honestly, being told on Saturday that we're going into these next steps of protocol, that was frustrating. It really was. But I understand it. I get it. We have to be safe, and that's what Dr. Seals and his team are trying to do, is keep us as safe as possible. And like I said, if we can get through this, if we can show everybody that by following the protocols, you give yourself a chance, then it's worth it. But to answer your question, Darren, I've had a couple of moments where, man, I just, this is tough. It really is. And and not to harp on my situation, but, about a month and a half ago, my routine was get up early in the morning, go to the hospital, come back, test, and then go into the building. That became monotonous at some point, and it was tough. And I could only imagine, what it must have been for Baltimore, for Oakland, for those teams that have had these little hiccups. And they've had to, Tennessee, and they've had to deal with that. So to your question, yeah, there's been some moments.
We'll take three more.
Hey, Ron, you've obviously been a big advocate of women in football, and this was a huge weekend for women in football with the Vanderbilt kicker and then the Cleveland Browns having the first woman serve as a position coach in NFL history. From your perspective, what was that like watching that unfold, and what kind of message do you hope, big picture, that sends to the rest of football, college, and the pros?
I think it's really cool. I really do, because I think what it's signifying, first of all, that a lot of these barriers are being broken down. And I think that's important, especially in society today, the way society is changing. We've got to come to terms that this is our new reality. And women in professional sports that have been predominantly male are those doors are starting to get kicked down. We saw what's happened in baseball with the first female general manager, and it's probably been a long time coming because, first of all, there's so many women that have been involved in professional athletics. And so it's just another step in the right direction because it's going to give opportunities to everybody, not just, certain men, but women as well. So I just think it's good for us. It's good for the world. And it's good for our business.
Thank you, Ron.
All righty, Scott.
Hey, Ron. Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously a team that has over the years just been solid, been at the top. From whether it was as a player and as certainly as a coach, what have you seen from this organization over the years that's allowed them to stay on top for a really long time?
I think more so it's about consistency. If you look at them, they've had 3 head coaches, it's in like the last 40 years. And I think that's probably the big reason for, you think about it, who they've had. They've had 3. And I think that's what it is. It's been the consistency up top. It's been the same family owning it. It's been the same general manager, I believe, for like the last 20, I want to say almost 30 years probably. And now, Mike Tomlin is one of the longest tenured coaches in the league. So I think consistency really is probably the most important thing. They have a culture, and they stuck to that culture since they've been with Chuck Noll, to Mike now. And when you do that, you give yourself, I think, the same chance to be successful because the formula for them obviously is working.
Thank you.
Last one.
Hey, Ron. In the offseason, you guys didn't go and do the splashy free agent signings. You didn't go get big name guys. And a lot, I think at the time you were talking about a lot of guys being more like you prove it deals and things like that, and younger players. Now that some of those guys have really been playing well, do you feel like, hey, that decision really worked out and that makes you happier for them because of that?
I think first of all, it's part of the formula that we did with intent. We did go after a couple of big names, to be honest with you. But the other guys that we looked at, are guys that you sit there and say, man, these guys are ready to have these kind of years. J.D. McKissick was somebody, that we felt could come in and contribute and be part of what we're doing. Logan Thomas is somebody that you felt really good about. I know Coach Hainer really liked him off of his tape. Just thought this guy was ready to ascend. Kevin Pierre-Louis is a guy that we felt could come in and help as well. So you look at these guys and say, these are the kind of guys you want. You look at our offensive line, and I talked about position flexibility, and we've had guys that have already shown it where they've played guard, they've played tackle, they've played the right side, they've played the left side. Those are the kind of things that help you, I think, as you try to put your team together. Now, some of those guys may not be your starters, but they may be top flight backups that are just as valuable to what you're trying to do. And if you can keep those guys around for a period of time, now it takes the pressure off going into the draft. That's the other thing too that we've got to think about. You look at the wide receiver position and you sit there and go, man, do we need to draft another guy, or do we have the makings of it? Or is there a guy in free agents that you add that guy to the mix and that position is solid? So you approach it that way, because I can tell you right now, looking at the defensive line, it's taken all the pressure off of us with those guys coming through and playing the way they have. And again, we don't know what happens in the next 5 weeks, and they're as has been pointed out, these next 3 weeks are going to be very tough. But we'll find out the character of this football team going forward, and that's exciting as well. So, to your point, you can go out and try and make the splash if the right guy's there. But if not, then you want to find guys, in my opinion, that are going to fit you and can contribute and take some of the pressure off going into the draft.